November 24th, 1944. 30,000 feet above Tokyo Bay. Captain Saburo Sakai feels his fighter shake as he pushes the throttle forward, straining to gain altitude. Through the frosted canopy of his Mitsubishi A6M0, he spots something that makes his breath catch, a formation of massive aircraft glinting like silver daggers in the thin sunlight above. They are impossibly high, impossibly large. His altimeter needle trembles at 28,000 feet, but the bombers above him seem to float effortlessly in air too thin for his engine to breathe. These are B-29 Superfortresses, 111 of them, and they have come to bomb the Nakajima aircraft factory at Musashino on the outskirts of Tokyo. Captain Sakai has heard the rumors, read the intelligence briefs that described these American behemoths, but seeing them now, in person, he understands something his commanders have been reluctant to admit. Japan's defenses are obsolete. He coaxes his Zero higher, watching his airspeed bleed away dangerously. At 29,000 feet, his controls feel mushy, unresponsive. The B-29s cruise serenely above him at 32,000 feet, completely beyond his reach. His radio crackles with the frustrated voices of other pilots. Nakamura reports engine failure trying to climb. Yamada's guns have frozen solid. Ito managed to reach altitude, but his ammunition lacks the range to be effective. The Americans continue undisturbed, their formation tight and purposeful. On the ground below, in the concrete bunker beneath Imperial General Headquarters in Ichigaya, Lieutenant General Torashiro Kawabe stands rigid as reports flood in. The air raid sirens wail across Tokyo for the first time since the Doolittle raid more than 2 years ago. But this is different. Those 16 B-25s in April 1942 were a pinprick, a gesture of defiance that accomplished little material damage. These B-29s represent something far more terrifying, a sustainable campaign of destruction. "How many interceptors have engaged?" Kawabe demands. "All available fighters from the 10th and 53rd Air Regiments, sir. Approximately 125 aircraft." The aide's voice is steady, but his hands tremble as he marks positions on the situation map. "And casualties inflicted?" A pause. "Unconfirmed, sir. Pilots report difficulty reaching operational altitude. Anti-aircraft batteries are firing, but the bombers are beyond optimal range." Kawabe's jaw tightens. He has spent months preparing Tokyo's defenses, positioning hundreds of anti-aircraft guns in concentric rings around vital targets, training fighter groups in high-altitude intercept tactics, establishing early warning networks throughout the home islands. None of it matters if they cannot reach the enemy. He thinks of the briefing he attended 3 months ago, when intelligence officers presented their assessment of the B-29. The numbers seemed fantastical then. Maximum speed of 357 miles per hour, service ceiling of 31,850 feet, combat radius of 1,600 miles fully loaded, defensive armament of 12.50 caliber machine guns and 120mm cannon. The Boeing engineers had created a fortress in the sky, pressurized and comfortable for its 11-man crew, while defenders struggled in oxygen-starved air below. But the most devastating number was range. With the fall of Saipan in July, American forces had established air bases only 1,500 miles from Tokyo, well within the B-29's operational envelope. For the first time since the war began, Japan's industrial heartland lay exposed to sustained strategic bombing. Outside the bunker, civilians crane their necks skyward, watching contrails sketch white lines across the blue November sky. Many have never seen enemy aircraft over their capital. They point and murmur, some in fear, others with a strange fascination. They do not yet understand what those distant silver specks represent. The beginning of their city's immolation. The bombs begin to fall. They are not the incendiaries that will later transform Tokyo into an inferno, but high-explosive general-purpose bombs weighing 500 to 1,000 pounds each. They tumble through 6 miles of air, accelerating, their fins stabilizing the deadly descent. The first impacts strike the Musashino plant, where women and conscripted workers assemble engines for the very fighters trying to defend the city above. Explosions ripple across the factory complex. Assembly halls collapse, machine shops erupt in flames, precision equipment shatters. The bombing is not particularly accurate this first time. Of 111 B-29s that departed Saipan, only 88 reached Tokyo, and of those, barely 24 managed to drop their loads on the primary target. Weather, navigation errors, and mechanical failures dispersed the rest. But accuracy is not the point, not yet. This is a demonstration, a message written in aluminum and explosives that says, "We can reach you now. We can come whenever we choose, and you cannot stop us." Captain Sakai finally coaxes his 0 to 30,000 feet, his engine coughing and stammering. He lines up behind one of the stragglers, a B-29 that has dropped back from formation with smoke trailing from its No. 3 engine. He closes to 400 yards and opens fire. His 20mm cannon shells arc through the thin air, and for a moment he thinks he sees strikes on the bomber's tail. Then the B-29's defensive gunners respond. 4 remote-controlled turrets swivel simultaneously, the result of a revolutionary General Electric fire control system, and converge their fire with computer-assisted precision. Tracer rounds slash past Sakai's canopy. He breaks hard right, diving away, his 0 shuddering from the evasive maneuver. As he descends, watching the silver bombers continue their relentless journey back toward Saipan, Captain Sakai understands what the generals in their bunkers are beginning to realize. The rules have changed. For 3 years, Japan's defensive strategy relied on geography, vast oceanic distances that kept enemy bombers away from the homeland. The B-29 has erased that protection in a single stroke. The raid lasts 35 minutes. When it ends, 17 B-29s have sustained damage from fighters and anti-aircraft fire, but none have been shot down. One will crash into the sea on the return flight, its crew rescued by submarine. The Musashino plant's production capacity is reduced by approximately 15%. Damaging, but not crippling. In the bunker, General Kawabe reviews the preliminary reports. The numbers tell a grim story, but it is the implications that weigh on him. This is only the beginning. December 3, 1944. Imperial Japanese Army Air Force Headquarters, Tokyo. Major General Kiyoshi Endo stares at the reconnaissance photographs spread across the mahogany table. The images, taken by a daring Mitsubishi Ki-46 Dyna reconnaissance plane that somehow survived a flight over Saipan, show what keeps him awake at night. Row upon row of B-29s lined up on Isley Field's newly paved runways. The photo interpreters have counted 127 bombers visible on the ground, with more arriving weekly. Additional airfields are under construction on Tinian and Guam. "How many can they build?" asks Colonel Matsui, his voice hollow. Endo does not answer immediately. He has seen the intelligence assessments of American industrial capacity, numbers so large they seemed like propaganda. Boeing's factories in Wichita, Renton, and Omaha are producing B-29s at a rate of 100 per month. The Americans lost 1 bomber in the November 24th raid. At current production rates, they can replace it in 7 hours. "Enough," Endo finally says. "They can build enough." The meeting has been called to assess Japan's defensive capabilities and propose countermeasures. Around the table sit representatives from the Army Air Force, the Naval Air Service, the Kempeitai Military Police, and the Home Ministry's Civil Defense Bureau. They are intelligent men, experienced officers who have survived years of brutal warfare across Asia and the Pacific. But the mathematics of the situation defeats them. Lieutenant Colonel Hideo Nakano from the Fighter Command presents his analysis. Our primary interceptor, the Ki-43 Hayabusa, has a service ceiling of 11,750 meters, approximately 38,500 feet. In theory, sufficient to engage the B-29. In practice. He pauses, choosing his words carefully. The aircraft requires nearly 40 minutes to reach that altitude, by which time the bombers have already released their ordnance and begun their return flight. Furthermore, at such heights, our pilots suffer from hypoxia despite oxygen equipment. Response times are degraded, accuracy declines, and we have already lost 6 pilots to altitude-related accidents. What about the new interceptors? Matsui asks. The Ki-84 Frank, the J-2M Raiden? The Ki-84 performs better at altitude, Nakano concedes. But we have fewer than 200 operational, and they are needed everywhere: Burma, China, the Philippines, here at home. As for the Raiden, it was designed for high-altitude interception, but teething problems with the engines have delayed full deployment. We might have sufficient numbers by spring. Perhaps. Spring. The word hangs in the air. Everyone in the room knows that spring is a lifetime away. General Endo turns to the anti-aircraft artillery representative, a grizzled army colonel named Fujimoto, whose face bears scars from a Chinese mortar attack in 1938. Your batteries? Fujimoto's expression darkens. Our Type 88 75mm guns have a maximum effective ceiling of 9,000 meters. The Type 99 88mm can reach 10,000 meters under ideal conditions. The B-29s cruise at 9,750 meters, sometimes higher. We are shooting at the very edge of our envelope, at targets traveling at 350 kilometers per hour. Our fire control equipment is adequate against low-altitude attackers, but... He spreads his hands in a gesture of futility. In the November raids, we expended over 14,000 rounds. We believe we may have damaged 12 aircraft. We destroyed none. The silence that follows is broken by an aide entering with updated casualty reports from the December 3rd raid, the second major B-29 attack on Tokyo, which occurred just hours ago. Endo scans the document. 81 B-29s attacked the Musashino plant again. Japanese fighters made 358 individual attack passes. Result: 1 B-29 shot down, crash landing in Tokyo Bay. 14 others sustained varying degrees of damage. All but the one destroyed returned to base. The cost to the defenders: 23 fighters lost, 19 pilots dead or missing, industrial production disrupted, 212 civilians killed in the bombing, over 500 wounded. This is unsustainable, Matsui says quietly. We are losing aircraft and pilots we cannot replace while inflicting losses the Americans absorb without difficulty. Across town, in a different kind of meeting, ordinary citizens are reaching similar conclusions. In the smoking ruins of a textile factory near Musashino, 40-year-old Kenji Yamamoto picks through the debris where his workplace stood that morning. He has worked here for 15 years, since he was 25, operating the German-made looms that produced fabric for military uniforms. The November raid damaged the facility. Today's attack has destroyed it completely. He finds what he is looking for: a metal lunchbox, dented but intact, containing the rice balls his wife Fumiko prepared this morning. The rice is scattered among shards of metal and concrete dust, inedible. He sits on a chunk of broken masonry and stares at the sky where the bombers appeared. So high they seemed like toys, untouchable. Yamamoto has believed in the war. When Japan struck Pearl Harbor, He celebrated. When Singapore fell, he felt proud. The newsreels showed Japanese soldiers marching triumphantly through Manila, Rangoon, Batavia. The Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere was becoming reality. The Americans and British were being driven from Asia. But those silver bombers told a different story. They spoke of an enemy with resources beyond imagination, an industrial base that could project power across 1,500 miles of ocean as casually as Japan once bombed Chinese cities. He thinks of his son, 16-year-old Tatsuo, already receiving preliminary military training at school. He thinks of the slogan painted on walls throughout Tokyo. 100 million die together. Ichioku Gyokusai. He has always considered it metaphorical, a statement of resolve. For the first time, he wonders if it might be literal. At Yokosuka Naval Base, Commander Takeo Shibata faces a different crisis. The B-29s have not yet targeted Yokosuka directly, but the December 3rd raid passed directly overhead, and his sailors watched helplessly as the formation droned past, heading for Tokyo. Shibata commands a destroyer that is currently in dry dock for repairs after taking torpedo damage in the Philippine Sea. His ship is immobilized, his crew idle, and morale is collapsing. Last night, 3 sailors attempted to desert. They were caught at a train station trying to reach their home villages. Desertion carries a death sentence, but Shibata understands the impulse. These young men, boys, really, none older than 22, have heard the scuttlebutt. The Philippines are lost, the Americans are coming, and now those massive bombers appear over Tokyo itself, untouchable, unstoppable. He recommended clemency. The men were instead sentenced to a brutal beating and reassignment to a chitin suicide torpedo unit. Shibata knows he should feel satisfaction at such punishment for cowardice. Instead, he feels only a creeping numbness. Back at Army headquarters, General Endo's meeting continues into the evening. Various proposals are discussed and dismissed. Balloon bombs filled with explosives launched toward the enemy bases, rejected as ineffective. Ramming attacks by expendable fighters, considered, but the math doesn't work. Trading one fighter for one bomber still favors the enemy. Night fighting units equipped with primitive radar, promising, but the equipment doesn't exist in sufficient quantities. Finally, a young captain from the Technical Bureau speaks up. His name is Suzuki, and he has been quiet throughout the meeting. Sir, perhaps we are approaching this incorrectly. The senior officers turn to look at him. Endo nods for him to continue. We cannot stop the B-29s, Suzuki says bluntly. Not with current resources. Our fighters cannot reach them consistently, our anti-aircraft guns cannot hit them reliably, and we lack the industrial capacity to produce interceptors in the necessary numbers. The Americans will continue to bomb us, and our defensive losses will mount while their losses remain acceptable. This is defeatist talk, Captain, Matsui snaps. It is realistic talk, sir. Suzuki's voice is steady. If we cannot stop the bombing, we must instead mitigate its effects. Disperse our industry, move factories underground, evacuate non-essential civilians from the cities, improve our civil defense and firefighting capabilities. Endo considers this. It is, essentially, an admission of defensive failure. But it is also logical. Continue. The B-29's advantage is altitude and range. We cannot match these, but we can make their targets less valuable, harder to destroy completely. A dispersed factory cannot be eliminated in a single raid. Underground facilities cannot be accurately bombed from 30,000 feet. The meeting breaks up near midnight with no clear solutions, only a growing recognition that the war has entered a new phase, one for which Japan is catastrophically unprepared. November 25th, 1944. Isley Field, Saipan, Mariana Islands. Major General Curtis LeMay stands on the coral runway, watching ground crews swarm over the returning B-29s like ants on fallen fruit. Mechanics probe battle damage, armament specialists reload gun turrets, refueling trucks pump thousands of gallons of high-octane aviation fuel into cavernous wing tanks. One bomber, Jolton Josie, has 127 holes stitched across her fuselage and wings, souvenirs from Japanese fighters and flak. Her crew chief runs his hand over the aluminum skin and shakes his head in admiration. The plane will fly again tomorrow. LeMay pulls a cigar from his pocket, but doesn't light it. He's calculating, always calculating. The raid achieved minimal damage for maximum effort, a truth that gnaws at him. But he also knows what the Japanese now know. The game has fundamentally changed. The B-29 isn't just another bomber. It's a revolution in strategic warfare, and understanding why requires understanding the machine itself. 3,000 miles away, in a secure facility outside Nagoya, Commander Takeo Shibata examines photographs of a B-29 that crash-landed in China 6 months earlier. Japanese recovery teams had retrieved major components before Chinese guerrillas could destroy them, and now Imperial Army engineers have spent months trying to comprehend what they're seeing. Shibata holds a cross-section diagram of the B-29's Wright R3350 duplex Cyclone engine, an 18-cylinder radial monster producing 2,200 horsepower. Each B-29 carries 4 of them. "Can we build this?" he asks the chief engineer beside him. The engineer, a civilian named Yoshiro Harada, who spent 15 years at Nakajima before being conscripted into military service, removes his glasses and cleans them slowly. It's a delaying tactic, and both men know it. "Commander, we can barely build the engines we have. Our metallurgy cannot produce alloys capable of withstanding these operating temperatures and pressures. Even if we had the formulas, our industrial capacity cannot manufacture them in quantity." He pauses, choosing his next words carefully. This engine alone represents a manufacturing sophistication we are years away from achieving, and the engine is only one system. Harada pulls out another schematic, the B-29's pressurized cabin system. The Superfortress maintains comfortable pressure and temperature at altitudes where outside air temperature drops to -60 degrees Fahrenheit. The crew compartments are connected by a pressurized tunnel over the bomb bay, allowing men to move freely, to aim precisely, to think clearly, while Japanese pilots gasp through oxygen masks and suffer frostbite in unpressurized cockpits. Then there's the defensive armament system, a marvel that has already cost Japanese pilots dearly. Unlike earlier bombers where gunners manually aimed weapons while crouched in cramped positions, the B-29 employs a centralized fire control system. Gunners sit at computing sites that automatically calculate range, deflection, and bullet drop. The turrets themselves are remotely operated, allowing a single gunner to control multiple positions. The tail gunner, isolated in his plexiglass bubble, commands 2.50 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon, creating an interlocking field of fire that makes rear approaches suicidal. Back at Isley Field, Lieutenant Thomas Weaver climbs down from his B-29, Ramp Queen, and strips off his flight gear. The 23-year-old bombardier from Des Moines, Iowa, has just completed his first combat mission, and his hands finally stop shaking as he lights a cigarette. The flight was 14 hours round trip, 7 hours to Tokyo, 35 minutes over target, 7 hours back. He remembers looking down through the Norden bomb site at the Japanese capital, watching the city spread beneath him like a detailed map, and feeling an odd disconnect. Up here, above the weather, above the defenses, cocooned in pressurized comfort, war felt almost abstract. "They couldn't touch us," he tells his pilot, Captain Ray Morrison, as they walk toward debriefing. "We were just beyond them." Morrison nods grimly. He'd watched Japanese fighters struggle upward, their contrails showing the desperation of their climbs, only to stall out or run out of ammunition at ineffective ranges. A few determined pilots had managed to reach altitude, but even then, the B-29's defensive fire kept them at bay. 1-0 had pressed close. Morrison had watched it through his windscreen, seeing the muzzle flashes from its guns. But the top turret gunner, Sergeant Mike Kowalski, had stitched the fighter from nose to tail. The Zero had simply come apart, disintegrating in a spray of debris and flame. "Don't get cocksure," Morrison warns. "They'll adapt." They always do. But privately, Morrison wonders what adaptation looks like when you're technologically outmatched. The B-29 represents American industrial might at its apex. 45,000 different parts manufactured by thousands of subcontractors, assembled in massive production facilities in Wichita, Renton, Marietta, and Omaha. Boeing's Wichita plant alone covers 4.2 million square feet and employs 29,795 workers. By war's end, they will produce 3,970 B-29s, each costing $639,000, roughly equivalent to $10 million today. Japan, by contrast, is already cannibalizing civilian infrastructure to keep its aircraft production alive. Aluminum is scarce, high-octane fuel scarcer still. Quality control has deteriorated as experienced workers are drafted and replaced by students and forced laborers. The newest Japanese fighters, the Kiwai-84 Frank and the J-2M Jack, can theoretically reach B-29 altitudes, but engines fail, armaments jam, and production numbers remain pitifully inadequate. In Tokyo, General Kawabe convenes an emergency meeting of the Army Air Service General Staff. 23 officers crowd into a windowless conference room, their faces illuminated by harsh overhead lights. On the wall, a map of Japan bristles with pins, red for American air bases in the Marianas, blue for Japanese defensive positions, black for industrial targets. The red pins form a semicircle around the black pins, a predator's arc closing on prey. Colonel Takushiro Hattori, chief of the operations section, delivers the assessment. "Gentlemen, we must confront reality. The B-29 possesses capabilities we cannot counter with existing defenses. Our fighters lack the operational ceiling to intercept effectively. Our anti-aircraft guns cannot reach their cruising altitude. Our early warning system provides insufficient time to organize coordinated responses." "Then what do you propose?" asks Major General Masakazu Kawabe, the Vice Chief of the Army General Staff, his voice sharp with frustration. "We must accept losses while developing new capabilities. Higher performance interceptors, improved anti-aircraft rockets, perhaps ramming tactics by pilots prepared for sacrifice." "You're suggesting our pilots commit suicide against bombers," interrupts General Kawabe. "I'm suggesting, sir, that desperate circumstances require desperate measures." The room falls silent. Everyone understands the unspoken truth. They are discussing how to die more effectively, not how to win. The appearance of the B-29 over Tokyo has revealed Japan's fundamental weakness, an industrial base that cannot compete with America's. For every B-29 shot down, 10 more roll off American assembly lines. For every Japanese pilot killed defending the homeland, there are fewer replacements with less training and worse equipment. Outside the conference room, Captain Sakai waits to brief the staff on his combat experience from yesterday's raid. He sits on a bench, still wearing his flight suit, and contemplates what he will tell them. Should he describe the helpless feeling of watching the bombers pass overhead, untouchable as gods? Should he mention the fear he saw in young pilots' eyes when they realized their bullets were falling short? Should he admit that Japan's vaunted fighter corps, which once ruled the skies from China to the Solomon Islands, has been rendered obsolete by a single aircraft design? He thinks back to 1941, when he flew cover for the carriers approaching Pearl Harbor, when Japanese aviation seemed invincible, when every engagement brought victory. The A-6M0 was the world's finest carrier fighter, fast, maneuverable, with exceptional range. But it was designed for a different war, one of aggressive expansion across short distances. The B-29 represents something Japan never anticipated, an enemy with the resources and technological sophistication to project devastating power across oceanic distances, to strike the homeland itself with industrial-scale precision. A young lieutenant approaches Sakai, barely 20 years old, fresh from abbreviated training. "Captain, is it true? Can we not shoot them down?" Sakai looks at the boy's eager face and considers lying, offering reassurance, maintaining the fiction of Japanese invulnerability. Instead, he tells the truth. "We can shoot them down, but not easily, not often, and not enough to matter." The lieutenant's face falls, and Sakai feels a surge of anger, not at the boy, but at the generals who sent Japan into war against an opponent they never truly understood. The B-29 is not just a technical achievement, it's a manifestation of American industrial philosophy. While Japan crafted fighters as precision instruments requiring expert pilots, America designed bombers as systems, complex but maintainable, powerful but producible, deadly but survivable. That night, as darkness falls over Tokyo, citizens look up at the stars and wonder which points of light might be bombers. The psychological impact has begun. For 3 years, they were told the homeland was inviolate, protected by distance and Japan's martial spirit. Now they know different. The B-29s will return. And next time, they might bring something worse than high explosives. March 9th, 1945, 11:47 p.m. Tokyo. The air raid sirens begin wailing at 10:30 p.m., their mechanical howl echoing through the narrow streets of Shitamachi, Tokyo's low city, a densely packed warren of wooden houses, small workshops, and family businesses clustered along the banks of the Sumida River. 53-year-old Fumiko Yamamoto herds her 2 youngest children, 8-year-old Haruko and 10-year-old Kenji, toward the neighborhood's designated shelter, a shallow trench covered with corrugated metal and sandbags. Her husband is at the ruins of his factory, serving in the mandatory Fire Watch Brigade. Her eldest son, Tatsuo, now 17, is somewhere in Kyushu, training with a newly formed air defense unit. She has done this 47 times before. The sirens, the rush to shelter, the waiting. Usually the bombers pass overhead, targeting industrial zones in the western districts. Sometimes they don't come at all. The sirens prove to be false alarms. Tonight feels different. The wind is strong, gusting from the northwest, and the air carries an unseasonable warmth that makes her uneasy. At 12:08 a.m. on March 10th, the first Pathfinder B-29s arrive over Tokyo at 7,000 feet, less than half their usual altitude. Captain Curtis LeMay has made a decision that will haunt both nations: strip the bombers of most defensive armament, load them with incendiary bombs instead of high explosives, and attack at night from low altitude. The gamble is calculated. Intelligence suggests Japanese night fighter capabilities are minimal, and low-altitude attacks will improve accuracy while allowing larger bomb loads. Each B-29 tonight carries 6 to 8 tons of M69 incendiary cluster bombs filled with jellied gasoline, napalm. The Pathfinders drop their loads first, marking a massive X across Shitamachi with brilliant magnesium flares and initial incendiary clusters. The target zone covers approximately 15 square miles of the city's most densely populated districts. Neighborhoods where over 1 million people live in wooden structures packed so tightly that fire lanes and streets barely exist. Fumiko hears the first explosions, a strange rattling cascade, like thousands of bamboo sticks falling. These are not the deep crumps of high-explosive bombs. These are lighter, sharper, scattered across hundreds of impact points. Within minutes, fires begin blooming across the district. Individual blazes merge rapidly, fed by the strong wind and the wooden construction that dominates Tokyo's residential areas. Major Kichi Fujita watches from the cockpit of his Nakajima J-1N Gecko night fighter as wave after wave of B-29s lumber across Tokyo. He has managed to reach an attacking bomber, firing his upward-angled cannon into its belly, and was rewarded with seeing the giant aircraft stagger, trailing fire, before crashing somewhere in the bay. But there are so many. 334 B-29s in total, more than have ever attacked Japan in a single raid. And they keep coming, lower than he's ever seen them, their bomb bay doors yawning open to rain down cylinders that burst into dozens of smaller bomblets. From his vantage point at 10,000 feet, Fujita watches Tokyo transform. Individual fires merge into conflagrations. Conflagrations merge into firestorms. The distinction matters. A conflagration is a large fire. A firestorm is a meteorological phenomenon, a thermal event so intense it generates its own weather system. Superheated air rises explosively, creating a vacuum that draws in surrounding air at hurricane velocities. The wind feeds the flames, which heat more air, which rises faster, which pulls in more oxygen-rich wind. The cycle becomes self-sustaining, unstoppable. Fumiko emerges from the shelter after 30 minutes, believing the raid has passed. She is confronted with hell. The sky glows orange, pulsing with the light of 1,000 fires. The wind has intensified to a roar, pulling debris through the streets. Paper, embers, entire roof tiles lifted and hurled like projectiles. The heat is immense, even though the nearest visible flames are 2 blocks away. "Mother, I'm frightened," Haruko whispers. "We must move." Away from the river. Fumiko knows the Sumida River is where panicked crowds always flee, to water, to imagined safety. But something tells her this is wrong, that the fire will drive everyone to the river, and the river will become a trap. They join a stream of neighbors fleeing north, carrying whatever they grabbed: photo albums, money, food parcels, a birdcage with a silent canary. The crowd moves in eerie, near silence. No one screaming yet. Everyone still believing they can outrun what's coming. Behind them, the firestorm grows. At 1:15 a.m., the thermal column above Shitamachi becomes visible from 30 miles away, a tower of smoke and flame reaching 20,000 feet into the night sky, illuminating the underbellies of the B-29s, still circling and dropping their loads. The firestorm has achieved critical mass. Winds within the burn zone now exceed 60 miles per hour, hot enough to ignite clothing on people merely near the flames, not yet touched by them. Fumiko's group of fleeing civilians, now perhaps 200 people, encounters a wall of flame blocking the street ahead. They turn east, toward the river, because there is nowhere else to go. The heat at their backs is unbearable, forcing them into a stumbling run. Kenji falls, and Fumiko yanks him upright with strength born of terror. Around them, wooden buildings are spontaneously combusting, not catching fire from embers, but igniting from radiant heat alone, the wood literally boiling off flammable gases that flash into flame. They reach the Sumida River at the Azuma Bridge. Thousands are already there, and thousands more pour in from every direction. The bridges are packed with humanity, and bodies line both banks. Some people wade into the water, seeking relief from the heat. Others jump from the bridges. Many simply stand paralyzed, staring at the advancing wall of flame that has now cut off every escape route. Fumiko makes a decision. She pulls her children away from the river, away from the crushing crowds, and forces them toward a small Buddhist temple she knows, 3 blocks inland. It has a stone foundation and tile roof. Not wood. It may survive. They run through streets filled with fire, Fumiko's hair singeing, her skin blistering from radiant heat. Haruko is crying. Kenji has stopped speaking. They stumble through the temple gate just as the building's wooden doors burst into flame. Inside, 40 other people have sought refuge. The temple priest, an elderly man named Tanaka, organizes them with surprising calm. Wet every cloth you have. Cover your mouths. Stay low. We will survive this. But the firestorm is now consuming oxygen faster than atmosphere can replace it. People begin suffocating not from smoke inhalation, but from anoxia. The air itself has been burned, leaving carbon monoxide and dioxide instead of breathable oxygen. In the streets outside, bodies lie unmarked by flame, dead from asphyxiation. At the river, thousands who jumped into the water to escape the heat are found drowned or boiled alive as the Sumida's temperature rises. Aboard the B-29 Boots and Saddle, tailgunner Sergeant Robert Martinez stares down at Tokyo and feels his stomach turn. He has flown 17 missions, dropped tons of explosives on Japanese targets, seen cities burn before. But this is different in scale and horror. The entire visible horizon is aflame, a sea of fire stretching as far as he can see. He knows there are people down there, women, children, old men. He knows that most of those wooden houses contain civilians, not soldiers. He also knows that those same districts contain small machine shops producing rifle parts, cottage industries weaving parachute silk, home-based assembly of fuses and detonators. Total war has blurred every line. Jesus Christ, he whispers into his oxygen mask. Jesus Christ. By 3 a.m., the raid is ending. The last B-29s depart, their bomb bays empty, their crews exhausted. Behind them, 16 square miles of Tokyo are burning or already burned, an area larger than what firebombing achieved in Hamburg or Dresden. The firestorm will burn itself out by dawn, having consumed everything combustible in its path. In the stone temple, Fumiko and her children survive, though Father Tanaka dies quietly in the night, sitting upright in meditation posture. When dawn comes and Fumiko emerges into gray light filtered through smoke, she finds a landscape transformed into something alien. Nothing remains but ash, twisted metal, and scorched earth. Bodies lie everywhere, some burned beyond recognition, others appearing merely asleep, killed by heat or asphyxiation without visible wounds. The Sumida River is clogged with corpses. She walks numbly through the devastation, holding her children's hands, unable to process the scale of destruction. Later, official counts will estimate 100,000 dead in a single night, more than died in the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. Another million are homeless. 16 square miles of Tokyo have ceased to exist. At Imperial General Headquarters, staff officers receive reports in stunned silence. The numbers are incomprehensible. Previous raids destroyed factories, damaged infrastructure, killed hundreds. This raid has obliterated an entire section of the capital, killed tens of thousands of civilians, and demonstrated a new American strategy. If Japan's industrial capacity cannot be destroyed factory by factory, then burn the cities that house both factories and workers. General Kawabe reads the preliminary casualty estimates and understands what the appearance of the B-29 truly meant. It was not just a technical challenge or a defensive problem to be solved. It was the instrument of Japan's immolation, the tool by which American industrial might would reduce Japanese cities to ash. The high-altitude precision bombing was a testing phase. This Holocaust by fire is the real campaign. Over the following weeks, LeMay's B-29s will return again and again. Nagoya, Osaka, Kobe, Yokohama, every major city will burn. By summer, there will be no meaningful strategic targets left. Japan's industrial capacity will be shattered, not by precision strikes on factories, but by burning the workers' homes, the transportation infrastructure, the social fabric itself. In a destroyed temple in Shitamachi, Fumiko Yamamoto sits amid the ashes and finally allows herself to weep. Her husband is dead. She knows this with certainty, though his body has not been found. The factory he guarded is gone, vaporized in the firestorm. Her home is gone. Her neighborhood is gone. Everything she knew has been erased in a single night. And she knows the bombers will return. May 29, 1945. Imperial Palace, Tokyo. Emperor Hirohito stands at a reinforced window in the underground Imperial Library, one of the few sections of the palace complex not yet damaged by bombing. Through thick glass, he observes what remains of his capital. The view stretches across a moonscape of ash and rubble, punctuated by the skeletal remains of reinforced concrete buildings. Everything else has burned. The Imperial Palace itself has not been deliberately targeted, but the May 25th raid brought flames close enough that palace staff fought through the night to prevent the ancient wooden structures from igniting. In his hand, he holds a leather-bound report from the Supreme War Council. The statistics are clinical, precise, devastating. Since March, B-29s have conducted systematic firebombing of Japan's major cities. Tokyo has been hit 5 times. Osaka, Nagoya, Kobe, and Yokohama are largely destroyed. Smaller cities, Kawasaki, Toyama, Fukui, have been added to the target list. The Americans are working methodically through every urban center with a population over 100,000. Total civilian casualties, estimated at over 400,000 dead, with millions more homeless and displaced. Industrial production, down 47% from January levels and falling. Transportation networks, crippled by systematic bombing of rail yards and bridges. Food distribution, breaking down as rural areas are cut off from urban centers. The careful language of the report cannot disguise the reality. Japan is being systematically reduced to pre-industrial conditions, while American forces tighten their noose around the home islands. The emperor's military aide, General Shigeru Hasunuma, stands respectfully at a distance. Your Majesty, the Supreme Council will convene at noon to discuss the situation. And what will they discuss, General? What options remain? Hirohito's voice is soft, measured, but underneath lies a current of something approaching despair. Hasunuma hesitates. The truth is that Japan's military leadership remains divided between those advocating for a negotiated settlement and those demanding ketsugo, the decisive battle on the Japanese mainland that will supposedly inflict such terrible casualties on invading Americans that favorable peace terms can be extracted. The latter position requires ignoring every piece of evidence accumulating since November. The B-29s, the fall of Iwo Jima, the ongoing destruction of Okinawa, the collapse of Germany, the impossibility of further meaningful resistance. The Army still believes that our spirit can overcome material disadvantages, Hasunuma finally offers. Spirit. Hirohito repeats the word as if testing its weight. Tell me, General, can spirit shoot down a B-29? 200 miles south, on Okinawa, the question has already been answered in blood. The battle for the island has raged since April 1st, and Japanese forces are in their final agony, compressed into the island's southern tip. Major Tadashi Kojo, commander of what remains of the 24th Division's Artillery Battalion, sits in a cave and listens to the earth shake from American naval bombardment. His unit started the battle with 18 guns. He now has 3 and fewer than 40 men capable of fighting. Outside, the sky is rarely visible through the smoke and dust, but when it clears, he sometimes sees them. B-29s passing overhead, not even bothering to target Okinawa anymore because the battle's outcome is no longer in doubt. The massive bombers transit to and from Japan with impunity, symbols of an industrial capacity that Japan cannot match, cannot comprehend, cannot defeat. Kojo has spent the last 2 weeks writing letters to his wife and daughter, knowing they will never be delivered. In the latest, he tries to explain what he has learned. We were told that Japanese spirit would overcome American material strength. We were told that our willingness to die would win the war. But spirit cannot fight machines. Courage cannot stop bombs. I have watched brave men die charging tanks, attacking aircraft with bamboo spears, throwing their bodies against barbed wire. Their courage was magnificent. It was also futile. The Americans replace every destroyed tank with 2 more, every downed aircraft with 10. They bomb us from heights we cannot reach, with weapons we cannot counter, supported by an industrial system we never understood. He sets down his pen as explosions walk across the ridgeline above his cave. Dust sifts down. Somewhere in the tunnels, a man is screaming. Kojo knows what's coming. The Americans will seal the caves with flamethrowers and explosives, or gas them, or simply wait for thirst and starvation to do the work. There will be no Thermopylae here, no glorious last stand that future generations celebrate. Just death in darkness, meaningless and forgotten. Back in Tokyo, the Supreme War Council meeting unfolds with grim predictability. Prime Minister Kantaro Suzuki, 77 years old and exhausted, presents the latest casualty projections. War Minister Korichika Anami counters with plans for mobilizing the civilian population. Every man, woman, and child will be armed with whatever weapons can be manufactured: sharpened bamboo spears, farming implements, improvised explosives. The Americans, he insists, will find invasion so costly that they will accept a negotiated peace preserving the imperial system and preventing occupation. Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo listens and sees delusion. He has studied the American bombing campaign with clear eyes. The B-29 raids are not random acts of destruction. They follow a methodical pattern designed to destroy Japan's ability to function as a modern nation. First came the attacks on aircraft factories and engine plants. Then the systematic destruction of oil refineries and storage facilities. Japan now has fuel for perhaps 3 months of combat operations. Then the firebombing campaign targeting urban industrial districts. Now, with most major cities destroyed, B-29s are mining harbors and inland waterways, strangling the already depleted maritime traffic that keeps Japan's island economy alive. The Americans are not seeking battle, Togo says quietly. They are eliminating our capacity to resist. The B-29 campaign is designed to make invasion unnecessary. They will simply burn and starve us into submission. Defeatist talk, Anami slams his fist on the table. Japan has never been conquered. Our spirit will not feed our people when rice shipments cannot move. Our spirit will not produce ammunition when our factories are ash. Our spirit will not shoot down bombers flying at 30,000 feet. Togo's voice rises, frustration breaking through diplomatic reserve. The appearance of the B-29 over Tokyo in November was not merely a tactical development. It was a declaration that we had lost the war. Everything since has been confirmation. The room falls into hostile silence. Emperor Hirohito, attending as an observer, says nothing, but his presence weighs on every word. The truth hangs unspoken. Japan faces either annihilation or surrender, and the military leadership cannot bring itself to choose. In a hospital in western Tokyo, one of the few medical facilities still functioning, Dr. Hideki Nakamura tends to patients who illustrate the war's true cost. Burns victims from the fire bombings, their flesh melted, their suffering beyond description. Children with malnutrition-related diseases, beriberi, rickets, kwashiorkor, conditions that should not exist in a modern nation. Soldiers back from the front with wounds that cannot be properly treated because medical supplies are exhausted. Old people dying of preventable illnesses because there are no antibiotics, no clean water, no heating fuel. Nakamura is 41 years old, trained at Tokyo Imperial University, experienced in modern medicine. He has spent the last 6 months learning medieval techniques because modern resources no longer exist. He amputates without anesthesia. He treats infections with maggot therapy. He watches patients die from conditions that should be trivial because there is no medicine, no equipment, no hope. A nurse approaches. Yuki Matsumoto, 23 years old, who should be planning a wedding but instead is washing suppurating wounds with water boiled from snow melted from the ash-covered ruins. "Doctor, another air raid alert." Nakamura looks up at the ceiling as if he can see through concrete and earth to the sky beyond. The alerts come so frequently now they've lost meaning. Sometimes the sirens wail for hours with no bombers appearing. Sometimes the B-29s arrive with no warning at all, flying so high the air raid spotters fail to detect them until bombs are already falling. "Continue treating the patients," he says. "If a bomb has our names on it, we cannot run far enough." The alert proves false this time, but Nakamura knows more raids are coming. The Americans have perfected their technique: high-altitude daylight precision attacks on remaining industrial targets, low-altitude nighttime area bombing on whatever cities still have structures worth burning. The B-29s rule the skies absolutely. Japanese fighter interceptions have become so rare that American bomber crews have begun to view missions as dangerous only because of mechanical failures and weather, not enemy action. On Tinian Island, 1,500 miles south, the 509th Composite Group conducts training missions that none of the other B-29 units understand. Their modified aircraft carry strange single bombs. Pumpkins, the crews call them. Fat orange cylinders far larger than normal ordnance. They practice precision drops from high altitude, seeking to hit small targets with accuracy measured in hundreds of feet. The other bombardment groups mock them. Why waste fuel on single bombs when you can carry tons of incendiaries? Colonel Paul Tibbets ignores the mockery. He knows what his unit is preparing for, though most of his own crew does not. Somewhere in the New Mexico desert, scientists have created a weapon that will render everything that came before: the fire bombings, the naval blockade, the planned invasion, potentially unnecessary. But even without that secret weapon, the war's trajectory is clear. Japan is beaten. The only question is how many more will die before Japanese leadership accepts reality. In a cave on Okinawa, Major Kojo seals his final letter and prepares for his last act. Outside, American forces are closing in. He has 23 men left, 3 artillery shells, and no illusions. Tomorrow or the next day, Americans will storm the cave. His orders are to fight to the death. He will obey because he is a soldier and because there is nothing else left to do. But he no longer believes there is honor or purpose in his death. He is simply one more casualty in a war that should have ended months ago, that perhaps should never have begun. He thinks of his daughter, 12 years old, living somewhere in rural Nagano if she still lives at all. He wonders if she will understand, when she is older, why he died in a cave on a worthless island while American bombers burned cities unopposed. He wonders if she will learn the true lesson, that Japan's leaders confused spiritual rhetoric with strategic reality, mistook fanaticism for strength, and led their nation into a war they could never win against an enemy whose industrial capacity they never comprehended. The B-29 proved all of this. One aircraft appearing over Tokyo on November 24, 1944, delivering a message that Japan's admirals and generals refused to read. You cannot fight machines with spirit, you cannot defeat industry with courage, and you cannot win a modern war with medieval philosophy. In the Imperial Palace Library, Emperor Hirohito sets down the casualty report and makes a decision that will take 3 more months and 2 atomic bombs to fully implement. The war must end. Japan must surrender. The B-29s have written the verdict in fire across every city from Hokkaido to Kyushu. Continuing resistance is not heroism. It is murder of his own people. The sun sets over ruined Tokyo, and in the gathering darkness, citizens listen for the drone of engines that may or may not come tonight. They have learned to recognize the sound, deeper and steadier than Japanese aircraft, a mechanical thunder that announces destruction. Some pray, some hide. Most simply endure because there is nothing else to do. The B-29 has done its work. Japan's commanders realized they were doomed the moment those silver giants appeared overhead, untouchable and unstoppable. Everything that follows is merely the slow, terrible process of transforming that realization into official surrender.